And it is the Black Powder Podcast, the only libertarian podcast in the universe, in the cosmos, on Earth, and in your mind. Yeah, that's my cool stuff for the moment. I am one of your hosts, the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews. I am currently joined by my non-melanated brother from another mother, the Honorable Eric Parker. Eric, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing great. I'm not sure what I did to deserve honorable, but I'm here for it.
That was my DEI gift to you, because we're trying to catch up so we could bring some equity. So DEI now only extends to you people. And I want to congratulate you.
What do you mean, you people? Honkies?
No, let's not go all George Jefferson all of a sudden. At any rate, our guest tonight, I have had the honor of hanging out with him a couple times here in the beautiful, rainy Southern California atmosphere. And he is one of my favorite individuals, and it goes all the way back. We had Spike Cohen on this podcast one time, and he was talking about a guy from Georgia that simply destroyed anybody who wanted to debate him in the Georgia Senate race, because we had some people that didn't want to show up. And he still slowly rotated them over some hot coal fires and roasted them. So without further ado, if you don't know who I'm talking about, he was the 2024 Libertarian presidential candidate. My good friend, Eric's good friend, Chase Oliver. Chase, how you doing?
I'm doing great, you guys. It's a chilly night here in Atlanta, but I am enjoying the vibes and having a good night. So I hope you guys are as well.
Yeah.
I think I'll sleep well if the rain continues. That rain drops on the roof. My family's from down south. I don't know if that's an inherited trait, but it seems like it's such a relaxing thing. Nowadays they make you pay for that sound in apps.
Yeah, well, I grew up. My grandparents were from Nashville, and they had a tin roof on their patio, and so yeah, I used to go out there and sit in the porch swing and listen to the rain back in the day. And you're right, that's a white noise machine these days, right?
Yeah.
So you're right. People pay for apps that make the sound that of my childhood. But yeah, it's a nice night here in Atlanta. A little chilly, but we've gotten over the rain. But yeah, I'm having a great night. So I'm thankful you guys are on here and happy to chat with you about the campaign and anything else, because yeah, I love meeting with friends, and it's been too long.
Indeed. Eric, you want to go first?
Yeah, I just want to say welcome to I guess that's almost the beard gang. You got the goatee going. So
yeah.
Welcome.
Well, you know what they say? Men's facial hair is nature's contour. This is why we don't wear makeup. We contour our face with facial hair. This is how we structure our face to look better. And they used to say that you couldn't be elected if you had a beard. And that's the thing is, that's why I didn't grow facial hair. But, JD Vance has now proven us wrong. And so, yeah, I feel the need to be able to grow a beard now and not feel uncomfortable about it. And yeah, if I ever run again, I think I'll just keep the facial hair. I think it looks better on me. So, and the guy I'm seeing agrees. So
and I was going to say,
happy life, happy wife, right?
Yeah.
I think I said to Marcus or somebody, I was like, look, I'm not giving JD Vance much credit for some of his rhetoric, but he did get a beard back in the White House, kind of. I guess the vice president stays in the White House. I don't know. Do they stay in the White House, or they just work in the White House? Where does the vice president sleep?
They work in the White House. They live in the Naval Observatory.
Yeah, that's right.
Ah, okay. Weird. And it's kind of
really
weird
cool building, though, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I had to know exactly where, if I had won, I had to know where Mike Termott was going to be sleeping at night. So I did my research, right?
Yeah. So
not too far away. The underground tunnels will get you to the White House, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first off, I just wanted to get your reaction, because I'm sure many a podcast, because libertarian podcasts are a dime a dozen, but there's only one real libertarian podcast, and currently you're on it. And I just wanted to get how's it going with you? How are you reflecting upon the moment of that we're currently in? As far as your run and whatnot.
Well, I can say personally, a lot of stress has been taken off my shoulders, right? Running a campaign is extremely stressful. And so I've had time to step away from that for a little bit, recover some family time, recover a little bit of sanity, sleep in the same bed for multiple nights in a row and not living out of a suitcase. So that has been, kind of a relief, right? You've just come off of a major undertaking. And, now I'm working a regular job, living that regular life again. It's a lot less crazy than it used to be. But reflecting back on that campaign, it was probably the greatest honor of my life to run. It was the most difficult task I've ever done, but it was so fulfilling to be able to meet people across the country, to spread the libertarian message. And, there are things I would have done differently. I, certainly would have liked to have gotten more votes, right? I think we all would love to see a libertarian president. But, for me, I felt like I left as much as I could on the field as I could. And towards like the last couple of months, you could feel, I could feel like, oh my God, it's like when you get near the end of the marathon, right? And your legs are cramping, but you see the finish line. That's how that last month was for me. It was like, I'm going to power through this and do it. And it's been great. And now where we're at, seeing the Trump administration, what's going on, there are things I'm cautiously optimistic for. There are things I'm extremely pessimistic about, right? And it's going to be a wash of those two things. And I'm going to continue to do what libertarians do, which is criticize governments that are in power, that abuse the rights of people. And I don't care who inhabits the Oval Office. I don't care if they came and spoke at our convention. I don't care if they made us some promises and even followed through on them. If there's other things that they do that deserve criticism, we need to be bold and and righteous enough to stand by our principles. And that's what I'm going to spend my time doing. And it's been an adventure so far since January 20th.
Eric?
Yeah, I guess without giving too much credit to, I guess, those in the Oval Office, I'm assuming the promises kept you're referring to as freeing Ross Ulbricht, correct? Is that one, or are there others that you think were made and kept? Or do you think that using legalese, maybe they kept some extra ones?
Well, I think Ross Ulbricht being freed is a absolutely good thing. And I think that is the promise that I think you can most accurately say Trump followed through on promising to libertarians. Now, when it comes to the other promises, putting libertarians in the cabinet in top positions, and even the Libertarian Party today is trying to say, oh, well, Robert Kennedy's a member of the party, so we got a libertarian in the cabinet. If that's the case, if Bill Weld had been put into the cabinet, would we be sending out fundraising emails and celebrating? I don't think the same leadership in the party would be doing that. And so, and let's say Bill Weld was actually on a ticket. He was nominated by delegates at the convention. Like, he has, a much greater claim to being called a libertarian, right? And so, while I think there's some areas where, say Robert Kennedy might align with us, I'm also highly skeptical of the way he wants to do things. I don't think it's going to be very freedom-based. Like, let's take drug safety and efficacy, for example, right? Like, I want to see the FDA completely separated from our government. I don't think that that's what's going to happen with Robert Kennedy. I think what he's going to do is he's going to try to press his own agenda onto the FDA. That'll then be pressed to us. But the libertarian answer is to say you don't need the federal government to be testing efficacy. At the most, they need to test safety. Efficacy can be completely done in the private marketplace by private actors who are funded by the pharmaceutical industry to be able to market how effective their drugs are. They actually want to see efficacy trials because they want to be able to say our drug is 99% effective or whatever, right? We don't need to do that in the realm of government. And we need to have people who are actually presenting real libertarian solutions. I don't think you're going to get that out of Robert Kennedy. So are there areas where I'm certainly thinking that it's going to be better than, say, HHS under Biden? Yeah, but, that's really a low bar to clear. And I think we need to be careful about when we celebrate things, I think, and be willing to celebrate things like Ross Ulbricht being free. That's awesome. Ross Ulbricht being free is so good. I've met Lynn Ulbricht. I have heard her face to face talking about how much she's worked for her son. And I'm very happy that happened. And I'm happy that every person along the line, including those in the Libertarian Party and Libertarian leadership, made that happen. It's not one person's thing to be done. There's a lot of credit to go around, and I'll give credit where it's due to each and every person there.
Okay. I have this jumble of thoughts because that was quite profound. But I wanted to ask, so when we let private companies worry about the efficacy, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, don't, and I'm trying to articulate this in the most libertarian way fashion, but they shouldn't be exempt from lawsuits and litigation against their products, say if they're ineffective or proved to be harmful. But we see both sides of the duopoly sending out special protections to corporate interests from those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to sound like a socialist commie, but corporations need to be held accountable for their products.
See, that's not communist at all. That's supporting
Yeah.
individual liberty and people's
Right.
right to not be harmed, coerced, or frauded by somebody.
Right.
And that's why I not only did I say I want to remove liability protections from industries like healthcare industries that should have to take care of themselves and monitor themselves and keep themselves safe from these kind of lawsuits. I also believe in fully removing tort caps on all kinds of things, because that's actually what would hold people accountable, especially like large corporate polluters, right? If you can take a polluter to a court and say they're poisoning this town, it's killing the kids, and we want to sue them and put them out of business, guess what? A citizen jury will put them out of business.
Right.
And that's an incentive for polluters not to pollute. It's the same thing for pharmaceutical manufacturers. If you remove the liability and you remove the tort cap, what you're going to see is you're going to see vaccine manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies being a lot more careful about what they put on the marketplace, what they say is actually effective, and what the side effects are. And they're going to be a lot more honest, because if they're honest, they can avoid those lawsuits. And so that's how you bring things in light. It's transparency. Like sunlight is the best disinfectant. Ironically enough, when we're talking about healthcare and pharmaceutical policy, that's the saying, sunlight's the best disinfectant, but that's the truth. When we bring these things into light, into the consciousness of the consumer, and allow them to go and take somebody to court when they feel like they've been frauded or harmed, that's the way it's supposed to work. And we're not supposed to have big corporate interest having a giant shield called government defending themselves from individuals who have been harmed.
So I agree with you that we should remove the immunity that the vaccine manufacturers, all drug manufacturers have. Is that something that has to happen through Congress, or is that something that HHS can do, strip those pharmaceutical companies of that immunity?
That's a complicated issue, because, certainly the COVID vaccine was manufactured and done under an emergency declaration. So that might be separated from other medical interventions overall. So that one might be able to be rolled back in terms of liability protections. But I think a lot of that stuff is baked into the cake through legislation. You'd have to work with Congress. This is one of the things that I do think is very important. And we need to look at as libertarians. The process is important. We can't just have a government eliminate whole departments via executive order, as much as I would like to, right? As much as I would love to see a magic wand, but that would also lead the way for the creation of government departments with the wave of a magic wand. And we don't want that. We have to go through the constitutional process of understanding that our Congress has the purse strings. And guess what? We have a Republican Congress who basically worship the Republican president. And if Donald Trump puts his focus on getting real budget legislation passed that really cuts down the size and scope of government, it can get done. But he has about 16 months to get it done at this point, because after that, you're running in the midterms, and it's very hard to get anybody to cut anything, because it's harder to take that home to the voters who are kind of conditioned to feel like you have to be given something in order to get a vote. And so if we want to see government cut, limited time. That's what we have, is a very limited window to get Congress to act.
So to kind of piggyback on that, for example, Trump has said with executive order, basically, we're going to get rid of the Department of Education. Thomas Massey has proposed and submitted a bill to end the Department of Education every year. I know of at least the last 4. He might have done it every year since he's been in Congress. I don't know. Why did this Republican Congress never support that before now? And why don't they just go ahead and pass that through their Congress and through the Senate right now? It's on the desk. Let's get it passed, you know?
Yep. And I think there's a couple of things to speak to there. First off, it requires the expending of political capital to get it done. And I don't know how serious Donald Trump is really about ending it. If it's just a rhetorical flourish, he's going to say, I signed an executive order and they didn't do it. If he doesn't put pressure on the Congress to get it done, because you're right, they haven't done it the last few years when the Republicans have been in control, even trying to maybe even force it to Biden's desk, right? Force him to veto it, right? Now they have a much friendlier Oval Office to bring that to. But it does require the Oval Office to push these members of Congress who are not going to move in that direction. And I think we're already seeing, I watched part of the Linda McMahon confirmation hearings today, and you have some who are talking about drawing it down, and you have some people who are like, well, we're going to limit the scope of. But if you're talking about eliminating the department, yeah, there's a 1-page bill. I think it's like a 4-page bill because, every bill at least has to have multiple pages these days. But it's like a 4 sentences, just eliminating the department and block granting it back to the states. I would support that Massey bill all day long. I think it's what we need to be having our president say. Like the president needs to say, support this bill in Congress and get it done to get it done. Because otherwise people are going to act. And then the biggest thing is you do have to get it through the Senate. You have to get it through a cloture motion in the Senate, which requires 60 votes. Which is very hard when you only have 52 Republican votes. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find some way to horse trade with Democrats. And maybe that involves, finding some way to get some of these maybe Democrats who are elected with huge populations who want to see choice in education in some of these states where choice in education is already starting to pass the statewide level and exert pressure on, you have to target those senators of who's going to be the most likely to swing over. That requires expending political capital. It requires statecraft. It requires actual governance and competency, which, sadly, I don't think we're going to see, a lot of that being expelled. And in fact, I think we're going to see a lot more political capital being spent on upping defense spending. If I were to bet.
Well, this is why gerrymandering is so freaking terrible. It is the worst shit you could ever imagine. Because what a lot of Americans don't understand about gerrymandering is politicians choosing you. They're not choosing geographical areas to represent. They're gerrymandering districts look like fish skeletons. If you've ever filleted a fish, you get to see it. It's all over the place, and there's just a block here. They'll skip 2 blocks, and then there'll be a block there.
I'll give you a better example. There's a font out there that's called Gerrymander, I believe, and it is congressional districts in the shape of letters. So you can find one that looks like a C, one that looks like a D, one that looks like a Q. Like they literally have a font because of how many stupid looking districts there are that don't look like a normal square, or like this is where the map, like where they have to draw around.
Are they actual congressional districts too?
Yes.
Hilarious. I know what gerrymandering is. They did that during my city council race when I was running in a district race. Their own rule said it shouldn't cross a large body of water. My district crossed the widest point of the St. Johns River. And I was like, whoa, what about this part? We got to have this massive bridge. But when I switched to at-large, it didn't matter. So kind of
I want to say this. No, it's not a joke. Gerrymandering is the single most. We're just going to talk about the democratic process. Gerrymandering is the single most anti-democratic process that there is. Because simply put, these are those paid lobbyists. These are the paid people that you have to pay to run for office to tell you who these voters are in this certain district. And when you go to the, and you know who uses that same information is the legislation to, when every 10 years, when they redistrict congressional zones or whatever it is, they're getting the same information that the politicians are getting, and they're going back and using that to their advantage, Democrats and Republicans.
Yep.
It's quite simple. That
this is one of the things we need.
Republic anymore.
So I know we all know Lars Mapstead. He's a great guy. One of the things he's working on right now is fighting against things like BS gerrymandering and proportional representation and a lot of things. That is something we do need to fix. And in fact, if we had proper proportional representation, there's a good chance we would have a handful of libertarians in Congress. Now, maybe not a ton, but we'd have enough to at least get the ball rolling and backing up Thomas Massie on things like this, and or being a broker, right? Like that's what we want to see, is the ability to have an adult in the room that's like saying, hey, I support this not because I'm a Democrat, but because it's a good idea, or I support this not because I'm a Republican, but because it's a good idea that's good for the people. And if we had more than two voices, you'd be able to have that. And gerrymandering is one of the things that prevents that. In my state of Georgia, like 60% of the state legislature races have one candidate on the ballot in November because they're so gerrymandered to be safe red or safe blue that the other mainstream party doesn't even field a candidate. And lack of ballot access means we don't run a libertarian because it's so difficult to get a libertarian on the ballot for a state legislature race. And so this leads to voters having one choice on their November ballot. And that is not a democratic process. That is a coronation process. And that's just not right. And so this is why we see so much stress in our legislatures, not just nationally, but in state houses across the country, because it's BS the way they draw our districts, the way they selectively pick who can and cannot run. This is why that fundamental things like ballot access are very important for libertarians. You know, we can talk about philosophy and policy, but if we don't go through process of like being able to actually run for office, it does us no good.
So I have a question. You mentioned proportional representation. I'm assuming the way that works is it goes off the percentage of registered voters in a certain party. Is that how it works? Like in a state, for example, if you had 100, I don't know how many, what's the California, how many congressional districts they have. But in a state, if you had so many and say 5% of your state was registered libertarian, then 5% of your Congress, if you could make the math work, would be registered libertarians. Is that how it would work?
Yeah, it'd be a vote that way. So like you could do this even down to a city council level. Like if you have a city council and people can vote based on, you know, proportional representation. Hey, the Libertarian Party got 15% of the vote. They're going to get 15% of the seats. They get to organize, you know, how that works. But there's also proportional representation in terms of the Electoral College, like Maine and Nebraska have, where they separate out their congressional districts for the Electoral College. So that way it's not a swing state, they're swing districts. That I think would be good for national elections because it would allow us to have every state basically become a swing state, because there's going to be areas where different people want to stress and you wouldn't be ignored when you get campaigned for. So there are different, you know, there's different areas of proportional representation out there. I support anything that allows for a broader representation of the spectrum of the voter to actually be heard. It's why I'm a big approval voting guy and a big ranked choice voting guy. Like, I think there's lots of areas where we can improve the process and it's not just to help libertarians. Like there's the side effect that this could possibly help third parties grow, but I also just think it's better for voters to see consensus. And I think it's better for elected leaders to see who put them in office. Like if you got into office with ranked choice voting with a 46% of the vote, but then that remaining 5% came from the Libertarian Party and threw you over the top, you kind of think to yourself, well, I better make those libertarians happy, because if I don't, I'm going to lose that voter base in the next election. So I better listen to them and maybe see what I can do for them as an elected official. And so even without winning, you can push the Overton window with you know, structures like that create broader representation. Even just in the mind of, say, an elected official who goes, well, I got to spend at least 5% of my time worrying about the libertarians.
Hey, Marcus, can you pull up this comment from Tommy, the one it's voting for a party, not just registration? So a question to that. So like what type of vote would that be? Like, would it be the percentage of votes that the president got, or would it be like the percentage of votes that maybe a constitutional amendment and your state level got?
No,
or how would that work?
So think about if you have, say you have a state with 15 or 20 seats, right? 20 congressional seats. And the proportional number of votes, you're voting for the party, not for individuals. You're voting for the party. And you would say, okay, I'm going to vote, for my Republican candidate or my Democratic candidate, my Libertarian candidate. If your candidate gets, if your party gets 10% of the vote, you get 10% of the seats. And it's typically done. And that's what I like about approval voting at the local level is you can go in literally as an individual or as a part of a slate. And if you're just well liked enough, you can win those approval votes. That's a kind of a different thing. I'm talking about two different things right now. I shouldn't be. That's stupid of me. But yeah, proportional representation basically just means that you're going to see either in the case of Congress, it's like, or in the case of the Electoral College, it would be separating it out based on the number of congressional seats.
Okay.
I like that kind of proportional representation in the Electoral College. That's the most important one to me, because right now we need every state to be like Maine and Nebraska with the Electoral College, because I want to see a more representative, broadly representative presidential election. That's what I'm most focused on. But you can do this all the way up and down the ballot, proportional kind of representation models and structures. Again, all the way down to your local city council.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you about Elon, because there was something that truly disturbed me. I'm not a big Elon fan, I'll admit that, for a variety of reasons. But he said that that some people are mad about what he's doing, or called a parasite class in America, when in fact the original parasite class has to be considered the government. The government is the one that's taking from you and not giving you anything back of consequence. And that is what a parasite does. The people are not willingly giving the government money. They're not willing to give the government their natural born rights, but the only entity in the history of mankind has taken away natural born rights is government. So how can he sit here and tell the people of the freest nation in the history of mankind that we have a parasite class, when in fact the parasite has been gaining power since the Whiskey Rebellion?
Well, I think I'll be fair to Elon. I think what he's referring to as the parasite class that's complaining about him are the government workers who are worried about their job and worried about their power, right? But those aren't the only people complaining about Elon. I mean, I certainly want to see a reduction of government, but I want to see it done in a way that is long lasting, has teeth, and will really be effective. And I think kind of the way Doge has been going, which is like dropping in tweets on what they're doing and not having a real structured look at what they're doing. I think we do need to audit every single department in our government.
100%.
I don't think it happens with a group full of programmers the way he's been doing. I don't think that's the most effective way. And in fact, my worry is that Elon is going to kind of bungle up the efficiency and reducing the government kind of thing so bad that it will swing the pendulum the other way. And people will feel like, oh my God, we have to have these government programs to survive. And that's my real worry. Again, the midterms are just 2 years away, and that can really change this whole outlook. But I do see one thing that really bugs me is when people are now saying that, like, oh, well, the regime is really mad about what Donald Trump is doing. Trump is now the regime. He is in charge. He is the head of the government. Elon is his special government employee. That's his designation, his advisor. He has an entire government of people underneath him who are now working. We can no longer say, now, yes, there's always going to be the government bureaucrats that have been there forever. And yeah, a lot of them need to disappear. But we can no longer say, the regime is mad. The regime is Trump. And we have to recognize that as libertarians when we're being honest in our criticisms. When we see things that are going wrong, we can't just excuse it because, well, Donald Trump, the deep state doesn't like him, so we have to like him. No, if he's effing up, we need to say so. And if he's doing good things, we need to say so. And I don't think everything he's done has been bad. Again, freeing Ross Ulbricht is good. The executive order saying that his government will never implement a CBDC, that is a fantastic executive order. I wish that could be done via legislation so it's holding future presidents to that same standard. Because I'm worried that as soon as he's out of office, the next one can go, rescind that, we're going to do the CBDC thing. And so I want to see things that are done in a lasting manner that involves getting Congress on board, and that involves the president flexing his muscle on Congress in a way we have really not seen since LBJ. And you need to have that really strong hand to have really substantive changes. And that's what brought the Great Society, Medicare, Medicaid, all those great big pieces of government legislation that LBJ passed back in the day. Well, you need to have that same force against the Congress to undo many of those structures. In fact, you even have to have more boldness to be able to get it done. And I worry that he doesn't want to flex the political capital because he's going to be, focusing on DEI and defining what a man and a woman is and punishing immigrants. And he really needs to get down to like the substantive problems of government and uproot them. And that's what a libertarian would be doing right now. That's what I would be doing right now if I were president. I'd be working on that.
See, what I find disappointing is that he's not taking advantage of the fact that he's a lame duck president. You know what I mean? Like you aren't worried about reelection. You shouldn't be. You could be burning that political capital that you no longer need after this. I mean, unless they're looking at some family dynasty in politics, and who knows if that's the plan. We need the Trump name to maintain that political capital, or MAGA, if you will. But you know how many leeches or whoever, or snakes in the grass, and we've seen it. Everyone, if you wanted to get elected in a Republican district, you called yourself America First, MAGA, blah blah blah. But if you didn't have the support of the establishment and people like Susie Wiles, you probably weren't going to get elected or reelected anyways. But I digress. Like, it's disappointing to see that he's not willing to just be like, hey, look, like you said, use the bully pulpit, use it and get up there. Like even I think Theodore Roosevelt was really good at using the bully pulpit. I think it was called the bully pulpit because of Theodore Roosevelt, I think.
Yeah, I think as a libertarian, if I were elected, I would be governing as if I were a lame duck, because I would recognize that if I were lucky enough to somehow make it in, they wouldn't let me do it twice. And so you would have to just go as fast, and not just fast as you can, because that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing speed, but we're not seeing precision. I think we're seeing so many things happening at once and it's a strategy from the Trump administration. If you do so many things at once, it's really hard for your critics to nail down one thing to oppose you on. But it also makes it really hard for your supporters to find one thing to support. Like it really scatters everything out, and it makes it really difficult to build that political capital and use it. So it's not just about speed, it's about process. And I do think hopefully there are people who can who can recognize how that process works, while also recognizing that the people who made that process the way it is to begin with suck. And we need to, as we go through this process, reform it to where it's not so difficult to peel away whole giant pieces of government from the root. And like, that's what we need to be seeing. And again, it involves using, kind of following the directions in the manner in which they are written down. And you do have to go by a certain process, and it's frustrating. It's time consuming. It's complicated, but hey, that's government. That's government at every level.
So, to my Gulf of Mexico roots, because my family's from Mobile, Pritchard, Alabama, I still call it the Gulf of Mexico because I don't give a shit. You know what I'm saying? At any rate, my family's from the Gulf, so gumbo is a part of our culture, and gumbo has a lot of ingredients, just like politics. And with gumbo, you can have one bad ingredient, and it screws up the whole pot of gumbo. And that's how I think our political system is. Gumbo at the end of the day is very delicious, but there could be that one thing that messes up everything. So for you, this past election cycle, and this is kind of a huge pivot, but how did you feel the National Party supported you in your election?
To use your gumbo metaphor, I feel like we burned the roux, like right from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, that fucks up everything. Excuse my French, but you fuck up the roux, that messes up everything.
Yeah, don't screw the roux. Now, and for me, I felt like the National Party. I don't think it's any secret that leadership in the National Party was very much interested in trying to cash libertarian, relevance into tying ourselves to Donald Trump and to the MAGA campaign, and then ultimately to RFK. And I do feel like a disservice was done to the campaign, because I wanted to work with our leadership. At our convention, when I won the nomination, I recognized I was not our chair's first pick. I was certainly not the person she was supporting or endorsing. But I went to her and said, let's work together and let's get this done. And I was given the, we'll do that. And then, drips and drabs, our team met with our leadership, but it was not a great relationship. Let's be real. And I don't feel like there was a ton of support. And in fact, we're now seeing that there was kind of back channeling to try to get RFK on the ballot in Colorado, and there was these other things. I'm not going to hold a grudge. Let's be real. Like, I'm living my life. I'm going to continue to live my life. I don't think she cost me the election, right? I do believe that the Libertarian was probably not going to win, no matter how much the Libertarian Party backed us this time around, being realistic. But I do think it harmed the party image, and it created real difficulties for the campaign. One of the biggest things that I wanted to do was raise money and fundraise. And, Joe Jorgensen raised a little under 3 million. I wanted to raise $3 to $5 million. That was my goal. And I thought with $3 to $5 million, we can do a hell of a job of spreading the libertarian message. And when you call people who have given to the Libertarian Party in the past, who have been big donors, who have been movers and shakers, and their first response is, I saw Donald Trump at your convention. You're not any different from Republicans. I'm not going to give to you. I'm just going to give to the Republicans this time around. It made it really difficult to run a message of anti-war, opposing, mandates of any kind by the state, education freedom, taxation is theft, auditing and ending the Federal Reserve. Like, those were the messages that I was traveling around the country to spread. And it made it a lot harder when a lot of people who would normally give resources to our party felt the need to take a step back or skip the middleman and just support Donald Trump.
That's terrible. I don't have anything other to. That's just fucking terrible. And that's what I was trying to explain to people. But I think this election cycle was more about the culture war than it was about liberty, freedom, economics, or anything else. This was a culture war election cycle. And when I would express my support for Chase, the first thing I got was your sexuality. And I was like, are you meeting Chase in a specific space and time where that matters to both you and him at the same time? And ultimately, that type of framing of the question blew their mind, because if you're concerned about any other American's sexual life, you're not the type of person I necessarily want to be voting, period. And that's anti-democratic. But I don't need stupid people choosing stupid people.
Well, there was certainly, I can say this. I was the first nationwide candidate on the ballot across the country who's LGBTQ ever. Like, suck on it, Pete. I beat you to the punch, right? Eat it, Buttigieg. But no, the truth is like, I got to do that. And when you're the first to the door, sometimes you get the most incoming fire. And I certainly got a lot of that. And, not from the average libertarian. I think most libertarians are pretty live and let live types of folks. But there was also this narrative that I was wanting to fight the culture war, that I was trying to be a culture war candidate. And the truth is much like any war, as a libertarian, I feel the need to call for a ceasefire and an armistice, and for people to live who might live differently and have different lives and different opinions to live coexisting with one another, so long as they do it in peace and don't harm the liberty of other people. So, maybe it was unpopular in a culture war election to say, let's have a culture war ceasefire. Let's let people live as they want to live. Let's not have the government promote one type of life over another. Let's let people be who they want to be. Let people have the choice, and when you're a parent, hey, pick the school your kid wants to go to. If you want to send your kid to Woke Academy, send them to Woke Academy. If you want to send them to Anti-Woke Academy, send them to Anti-Woke Academy. You want your kid to play on the trans-inclusive softball league, send them there. You want them to play on the non-trans-inclusive softball league, send them there and see which softball league lasts the longest. Like, we shouldn't be electing members of government to be softball commissioners. That's kind of my whole thing. It's like, we got way too much to worry about to fight a culture war, namely actual wars, namely a near $40 trillion debt that's growing day after day after day, that it doesn't matter how, what education your kids are going to get if we have a complete debt crisis and the money's worth nothing in 20 years. Doesn't matter how well educated they're going to be in the bread line just like everybody else. And so there's a lot more important things for us to focus on than what divides us based on who we love, who we worship, how we look, how we live our lives. If we live it in peace, it shouldn't be any different. And that's really, that was my message. And it kind of got twisted into Chase wants to trans all the kids. No, I want parents and doctors and to be making medical decisions for their kids, and not some random bureaucrat who's based on whatever political flavor the day is. And I think we've politicized medicine. We've politicized culture. We've politicized education. We need to decouple ourselves from that. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to elect libertarians, because we want that ring of power to toss it into Mountain Doom, to use a Lord of the Rings reference. You know, we don't want to maintain that power for ourselves and try to impose our values on other people. And I think if we could market ourselves in that way, we could be very attractive to a broad spectrum of people. Just the people who don't want to be Karens on the left or the right.
I just want to point out one fact that you had the same position on minor transitions as Trump, where he said that was a parental decision. I'm paraphrasing to a certain degree, but it was a decision made up to parents and whatnot, and you didn't necessarily agree with people under 18 being able to do it without such.
Yeah, I've always said have parents involved in these things. That's one of the things that I think gets twisted. Is I've always said let parents be the arbiters, and I've always been somebody who advocates no surgery for under 18, because I do believe that that is something that can wait until you're old enough as an individual to consent to a surgery that literally like completely alters the composition of your body. But with other things, there's a lot of medical decisions parents have to make for their kids. If your kids get cancer, parents have to decide, are we going to go the surgery route? Are we going to go the chemotherapy route? Are we going to do radiation therapy? What are we going to do for our kid? And guess what? There's awful side effects that you have to consider as a parent. There's lots of things that you have to consider as a parent with regards to education. Do I want my kid to go to a private school or a religious parochial school? Do I want my kid to be homeschooled? Do I want to send them to the public school? God help them, right? Like, it's up to you as a parent to really determine the best course for your child, and to work with your child to find that best course, and then to work with other professionals who have a vested interest in trying to be a good advisor. And that involves doing some research. Doesn't involve finding the first doctor that comes to the door either. It involves researching to find the best doctor for you and your family. And I want people to have all of those choices. I don't want to limit that. Certainly not with the monopoly of violence from government. I think that's where people get it twisted. And that's why I say Karens on the left or the right. If you want to use the force and monopoly of violence that the government enjoys to push your way of life on somebody, you are a Karen with a gun. That's what you are.
Yeah. Before I head this off to Eric real quick, I want to point out to everybody that's listening, watching, and will listen and watch. The first time we had Chase on here, we asked him a question. Well, I specifically asked him a question about where he stood on the culture war. And he says, I didn't believe in war, period. And he most certainly didn't believe in a culture war. And I want to point out to the American people at this point, that's what you are in effect fighting right now, because economically you're in the same shape. Nothing's changing. In fact, they're unfortunately, things are not going in the right direction. And if you look at the economics of the situation, we're not effecting change to change that direction that we're going in. And so until the American people understand that there is no significant difference in the duopoly between Democrats and Republicans, because the gerrymandering, like to our earlier points in this podcast, how do you get elected in a district that is far left or far right? You have to go further left or further right. And that's why we're not seeing, and we won't see any true electoral differences until we understand that our government is choosing us. And when you didn't give Chase Oliver a chance, because this was one of our lowest turnouts ever, and I personally blame the National Party, and I have no bones about saying that. I think they failed you, and they failed in combating the narrative of this culture war with just basic, plain economic common sense and human being common sense on the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, well, I will. I see your point, but I will have one slight diversion there, which is I do feel despite the challenges and despite the hurdles,
Mhm.
if you look at historic vote totals and percentages of the Libertarian Party, I am right there, like in terms of total numbers of votes. I'm right square in the middle, actually a little higher than the middle of the 13 campaigns that have run. If you look at percentage of the votes, I'm right in the middle, down one rung under Ron Paul in 88, but I've beaten out Bob Barr, Narek, Harry Brown. Like, there's a lot of great libertarian candidates that
Right.
had lower numbers of votes. I don't say that to disparage any of them. I say that to say that even despite challenges, we were able to do some really hard work and get as many votes as we could. And if we had the full backing of leadership and others, I think we could have improved much of what we had, and at least either held ground or maybe even gained ground from where we were at in 2020. And that's where I think we missed an opportunity. But it's one that I'm looking forward to building on. I want to make sure whoever has it in 28 ain't getting the same treatment that I got. That's my goal.
100%. I agree with you, Eric.
So I was going to say, like, that's my biggest complaint about the way your campaign was treated by the party and by people who call themselves libertarians, by activists, by volunteers or former volunteers, state parties. All of that is, if the goal is to continue to grow the Libertarian Party, to win elections down ballot, I think we got to have a good showing, better showing, a growing percentage of votes for a presidential ticket. And I'm worried that, like, hypothetically in 2028, if we could have got a great person that could have, got us to 10% or 5% of the vote, now they're in I'm not saying this is your fault. I'm blaming mostly the party and the leadership, but now they're going to look at, like, how little support you got from the party and say, why would I run as a libertarian? They're not going to support me. And I want to make that point because I guess what I'm getting at is, like, do you think we have to start over? Is there a playbook for the next presidential candidate? How do we start reaching out to someone like, I don't know, Big Boy from Outcast in Atlanta to be the vice presidential candidate or something like that? You know what I mean? Somebody who's, I've heard say they're libertarian in the past, like a celebrity name, or a Justin Amash for president, top of the ticket, like somebody that's been in DC and also has name recognition. Like, what do we have to do as a party and to build so that we could have that type of a ticket in 2028?
Well, I think it involves a couple of things. One, it does involve putting leadership in place who are going to be focused on doing the work of a political party. The work of the Libertarian Party is not the total work of the Liberty movement, right? There are PACs, there are activist organizations, and then there's the Libertarian Party. And if we're going to focus on the work of a party that is running candidates, building a party structure, and we have to show ourselves to be serious to do that, and we can still support other areas of the Liberty movement at the same time. It doesn't need to be, a siloed thing, but that needs to be our main focus. I think the next thing we need to do is start seeing state parties across the country. We don't have elected libertarians in state legislatures. And so what we need our state parties to start doing is to start acting as if they are governing in a minority of zero. They need to start actually attending committee hearings and working with members of the legislature to identify areas of legislation that they either greatly agree with or greatly oppose, and work with people to do that. Provide that expert testimony. Be active when we need to see action in terms of phone banking and letter writing and op-eds and these kinds of things. Show us doing the serious work of a party. And that doesn't mean we have to glom on and be the JV league for one party or the other. In fact, I think that allows us to be very much a broker of saying, let's be the adult in the room. And then when Republicans want us to make something look bipartisan, they'll invite the libertarians in the room, and the Democrats will do the same thing. I think we have state affiliates that are doing that work somewhat effectively. Indiana is one that I think of a lot. They're a very well-run state affiliate that does a lot of really good work in terms of lobbying and activism within the political structure. What are we going to need to do to get those big names in? Yeah, act like a serious political party. We don't have a ton of funding, but we can still, carry ourselves in a professional, ethical, and transparent manner that will let people feel comfortable coming in to the party. And I think that's something we do need to fix. And it's something that I'm focusing on in my home state of Georgia, but nationally, That's what that's the message that I'm going to be bringing across as we go to the next national convention in Grand Rapids and ultimately our next nominating convention. I don't know if I'm going to run in 4 years, but I know whoever does run needs to have a more professionalized party. And that will draw better talent. Like, that is an issue we do have. We do have an issue of bringing in talent for our bench, because a lot of people who maybe got burned out in the Republican Party or got burned out in the Democratic Party, who have lots of really usable skills, they're not going to jump into bed with us unless they see us wanting to apply those usable skills in a way that makes sense. And trust me, there's people who get burned out on the major parties every election cycle who maybe are broadly more libertarian than their national party is. And we need to bring them into the tent and make them more libertarian while we also utilize those skills that they have. That's a good thing.
So real quick, I just want to ask, and you saying the direction you want to see the party going, how do you feel about the new party leadership chair and vice chair real quick? Do you like what you're seeing so far? Like some? Do you know both of them? Have you talked to both of them?
Yeah. I know both Vice Chair Dar and Chair Nikela. I've interacted and met with them both as I've traveled across the country. One of the things that I would urge people to do is to recognize that you're not going to get. I think the harshest critics of Angela McArdle are not going to get everything they want out of Stephen Nikela, nor are the greatest supporters of Angela McArdle going to get everything they want out of Stephen Nikela. But what I think you're going to get out of the new chair is somebody who is willing to listen to people, even if they disagree with them. There have been times when Stephen has made votes that I've disagreed with, but he's still managed to sit with me for a half hour and hashed out why I think something and why he believes something in a way that's professional. That is something that's been severely lacking. I don't think you're going to see him trash talking members of the Libertarian National Committee on Twitter or shit talking on the public list. That's a welcome change. And I think that's a good change for the right direction. And I would say the same of Vice Chair Paul Dar. I think he's a very respectful person. And and that is a move in the right direction. Am I going to like everything that's ever done? Probably not, because otherwise I'd be the chair and I'd be able to wave a magic wand and do whatever the hell I want, right? That's the only way to get everything I want. That's the only way any libertarian gets everything they want. But I think we need to give some breathing room here. I am going to, now that I've gotten back in the workforce, getting that regular paycheck, I'm going to resume donating to the party to specific things that I really want to see, namely earmarking for things like ballot access, earmarking for things like, other projects that I want to see going forward. And that's where I think if you are cautiously optimistic, that's where we need to put our money where our mouth is to show that there's a willingness to see change. Right? Doesn't mean you have to jump into bed 100%, but let's give some breathing room and let's give some common grace to a new leadership to maybe get the feet out from under them and start seeing what can be improved. That being said, I'm going to keep all of my options open as a likely delegate for 2026. And I'm going to be willing to meet with anybody who wants to run for any position in the party as I guess I'm 40 elder statesman of the party. I can now, be, happy to meet with folks and hear from them and hear what their direction is and choose who to support. But I'm right now willing to support the Libertarian Party, just as I did as our candidate. Even when I had leadership that was not thrilled about me, I always told people I'm a proud member of the Libertarian Party. That's not going to change just because now we have leadership that I feel is even going to be more professional and hopefully transparent. I will say this, though. I do disagree with selling our national headquarters. I think we need to find another way to gain some revenue.
That's terrible. I just want to give you an opportunity because as we're wrapping this up, for a closing statement on your experience from the inception of you running for office at the highest office in the land until right now. And, that's Eric. Do you have any other questions? Because that's.
And maybe you could cover some of that in your closing remarks. Just 3 things you think went great during your campaign, and 3 things that you think you can improve, or the next candidate could improve, and moving forward. And also, I'd like to know, hey, what are you up to now? What are you involved with now, other than your 9 to 5? Are you involved with any political activism or anything going on? That's about it.
Yeah. Well, let's call this the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So some good things I think we definitely did during the campaign. I think we ran a positive campaign. And I think that's important to get new voters into the booth. And in fact, with retail politics, when you're actually meeting voters one-on-one, I think it's really important to be not just talking about how bad the government is, but about how good libertarian ideas are. And that's kind of what I led with, is not just government bad, but like freedom good. Like, and I think having that tone in the campaign did help a lot of open-minded people take a good look at us, right? I think one of the things that I had was a running mate who was willing to do what we asked of him. And that was namely getting in his truck and driving around the country all over the place to do all kinds of meetings. And so I'm thankful that I had a running mate. I think it was a good thing that I had a running mate who was willing to sit down, listen with me, work with our staffs. We blended our staffs pretty well from the get-go. A lot of good people on Mike Termott's team became good members of the Oliver Termott campaign. So I think that was a good marriage. In fact, I would argue that we did that better than maybe some past campaigns have done when a president and VP candidate have gotten together. So I think that was a definite plus. And then lastly, I think our media and marketing operation, shout out to my media and marketing team led by Kelsey Lyon and Amber Howell. They kept me so busy doing a lot of what I think is really important is local media, local news. Because people distrust the CNNs and Fox News of the world, but they really do trust their local ABC or NBC affiliate a lot more. And so I'm really thankful that our team was able to continue to have me constantly busy traveling, constantly busy doing media. So that was the best parts of our campaign. I think things we can improve upon, certainly fundraising. That's not just the result of the national party. I do think that we have to come up with better fundraising strategies in order to do a lot of the other things we wanted to do. I think one of the things we were just not able to do because of that, which would have been very helpful, is the direct marketing through OTT advertising that we had wanted to budget out. But without the money to do it, you cannot run the ads. We had some great ads. Our guy Austin up there in Knoxville, he'd made some fantastic ads for me. But without the money to put that into OTT streaming advertising, it just wasn't able to get in front of enough people. That's one thing that I hope future campaigns with a little bit more money can hopefully do, is geofence likely areas. Like, let's say a gun show. Okay, geofence that gun show. And that way, any phone that gets activated and pinged there, that's who you directly OTT advertise a pro Second Amendment ad to, because that gets the ad right in front of somebody who's likely to care about that issue. Or if you geofence an immigration protest and you put pro-immigration messaging into the OTT advertising, that draws people into libertarian tent based on their single issue. So that's something I think we could have done better and should have been able to do better if we didn't be able to fundraise. I think, as much as I wanted to bridge divides, I don't think I bridged enough within the Libertarian Party. I think I could have done a better job of that. I'm not going to say it was a bad idea for me to skip Tim Pool. It was actually a good idea for me to skip Tim Pool based on the conditions that would have been. I would have loved to have done a one-on-one with him, because I think that would have been a very large audience to reach. And that was what, we offered his team, because that's what was offered to both RFK and Trump. And we never got a response. I would have loved to have picked that up. I wish we could have been on Theo Vaughn. That's the show that I really wanted to do, because I've been a fan of Theo since Road Rules, right? So there was a lot of those podcasts that I wanted to get on. We just didn't have the opportunity. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity, unfortunately. And then lastly, the ugly part of it is we had to deal with inter-party real mudslinging, and a lot of energy and capital had to be wasted on my own flank, making sure I was on the ballot in states like Colorado or others. And it wasted time, and it certainly wasted media time when they call and say, well, what's this going on about the Mises Caucus? Why does Angela McArdle not like you? Well, if that's the first 5 minutes of every 10-minute interview, it's really hard to sell the libertarian message. And so there were definitely good things we did. There were things we certainly needed to improve and fix upon. Fundraising is the biggest one, but also, mending some of those bridges might have been something we could have focused a little bit more on. And then there was the ugliness, just the inter-party ugliness. So, but by and large, I'm satisfied with the way my team ran. We left it all on the field. And if I ever have the opportunity to do it again, I've learned an entire lot. And even if I'm not the guy in 28 or 32 or whenever, whoever is that guy or girl, I'm willing to sit down with them and, talk about these things, because I think it's important to pass that institutional knowledge along. The first thing that I did when I thought about running for president is I got Steve Dosbach to get me a dinner with Joe Jorgensen because I wanted to ask her about her experiences on the campaign trail and what she thought she could have done better and what she felt she did right. And it was a valuable resource. And lo and behold, I got the nomination, just under a year later there. So that was totally worth it. I think we need to do that going forward.
Can I ask you something real quick?
Yes, sir.
Can you reach out to Joe Jorgensen? Because I have done so many times. I want to talk to her so bad that I'm asking you to say, this is a dear friend of mine. We've met twice. We physically have coupled hands and looked in each other's eyes in the Libertarian message. So this isn't like a non-starter for anything, but I would love to have her on because I think she would be able to provide a message to us that hasn't been heard in a while. I voted for her proudly.
Oh yeah, as did I. And you know what? Next time I get in touch with her or cross paths, I will definitely drop the recommendation to do that. And she is somebody who I think also got a little bit of an unfair deal when she ran for president.
100%.
And that's because she got blamed. She got called like this giant woke candidate. But if you ever sit down and you talk to Jo Jorgensen, she's a lot more closer to an anarchist than most of her critics would give her credit for. She's a smart person, very brilliant and a lot of stuff. And she's been doing this for quite a while. She got to run as a running mate for one of the best libertarian thinkers out there, Harry Brown. That's one of the things I'm most jealous of Jo Jorgensen. And then also she owns a Russian-made AK-47, which she actually let me borrow to a shooting range event in Georgia. And when I tell you, man, I even told our mutual acquaintance that made that happen, hey, would she be willing to maybe sell that? And I said, there's no way she'll ever sell it. And I was I want to buy this gun from her. But I think she'd be a great person to be on there sometime, and she's lovely. So next time our paths cross, I'll try to make sure to remember to say, hey, you know what? Get on there with Eric and Marcus on Black Powder, and they'll take good care of you. So
okay, so I'm gonna ask you. Obviously, you got her email address. I'm just gonna ask you to just quietly just send a nice little message to her.
I'll shoot her a text.
Okay.
I'll shoot her a text.
Oh dang, you one up me. So thank you very much for that because
I can't promise she's going to listen to my text. I'm just Chase. I don't know. I'm just Chase Oliver. She's just Jo Jorgensen. But I'll shoot her a text. But
all I
can't make promises. I don't speak on behalf of Jo Jorgensen. That's the only one who does that is Jo herself. But I will next time I interact. I will definitely drop your name with her because you guys are always great and you're very fun to be around. And of course, you're right. I have gotten to meet both of you live and in person on either coast. You guys both live in way sunnier environments than I do. So, I got to get back down to Duval
I'm in North Carolina now, Chase.
Oh, yeah. I forgot you moved to North Kakalaki. Well, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to come over there and have some decent
craft beer.
I won't say it's the best.
Craft beer.
There's more. Man, you can't swing a dead cat in North Carolina without hitting a craft brewery out there. So, yeah, I'll come out there and say hello to you.
Hey, out here in rainy Southern California, we have some craft stuff too. And you're more than welcome to come out here and enjoy our craft products.
Oh, I know what craft products you got in California. Trust me.
But, dude, I can't tell you how mad I got at people who talk shit. But I got to tell you that I defended you similar to how I would my own son or daughter. Because I thought you were the most genuine candidate that spoke from the heart and was the only person that I could truly vote for. I was going to vote for the Libertarian candidate regardless, but when we basically had everybody on except I can't remember his name, but we had almost every registered Libertarian POTUS candidate on the podcast. You are most certainly in my top 2, and I want to thank you because that is no small undertaking to go around the country, visit all 50 states while you were working full time and hitting all these states Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then going back to work on Monday through Thursday and And a lot of people don't recognize that sacrifice that you did. You didn't
I actually
have
took
it.
away from work full time. I used my life savings. So
Yeah.
I recognized that I had to commit full time. So I started out doing it while working, but very quickly I realized that was impossible. So I just I'm now, and you asked what I'm doing now. Now I'm living that 9-to-5 life, recouping that savings, and we'll see if I'm crazy enough to do this whole thing over again in 4 years. Who knows? But in the meantime, I'm gonna keep rocking and rolling, spreading the message of liberty, and I know you guys are gonna keep doing that too. And last thing I'll say is I appreciate you defending me. I appreciate you rising and fighting for this campaign. But here's one thing I will ask you: don't hold a grudge, don't hold guilt, don't hold like hard feelings. You know why? Because I'm not. And if I can let it go, you can let it go. Let's live our lives. Let's keep being free people and having a good time. And I'm willing to say, hey, I don't care if you didn't vote for me. If you're here to fight for liberty, I don't care who you voted for in 24. It's 25 now. So like, let's move forward. And if you voted for Trump and you're now realizing I got a little duped, or if in 4 years you realize, oh my God, we went to war with freaking over Gaza, or we did this, we did that, and I just can't justify that. You know what? Welcome into the tent. I'm not going to hate you because you didn't vote for me in 4 years. You know what? Like 150 million Americans did not vote for me, and I can't hold that much hate in my heart. So I hope that those of you who defended me just like you did, Marcus, don't hold a grudge. And when people come back to the party, maybe with a little tail between their legs because they thought MAGA was the solution, I got fooled. Just like some people got fooled on George W. Bush. We had one of our founders of the party, Hospers, voted for George W. Bush. Think about that. So if they can come back from that, people can come back from MAGA. I'm just saying.
Eric, you got a closing remark?
No, I thought that pretty much nailed it, man. I appreciate you coming on. Keep us informed with anything going on. If you got anything in your back pocket, anything you're planning on doing in Georgia.
Couple little things in the works. I'm going to be very active in my state party. I might do the nonprofit thing. We're still figuring out what that's going to look like. But really, right now, I'm just focused on spending some extra time with the family that I missed these last 2 years and enjoying sleeping in the same bed each night for a little while. But yeah, there will be projects coming forward, and I will definitely let you guys know. And I'm excited.
And how does everybody keep up with you or get in contact with you?
So you can follow me on social media at Chase for Liberty on X, on Meta, on Instagram, on TikTok, if it's still around. As long as it's around, I'll be there at Chase for Liberty. So keep checking us out there. I'm most active these days on X because that seems to be the cesspool of politics these days. But I'm going to keep trying to update everything a little bit more frequently. So it's just me now. I don't have a whole team of people doing it these days. So please forgive me if I haven't updated my Instagram in a minute. But we're going to keep trying to stay active at Chase for Liberty. Keep it up.
Quite excellent. And I want to thank everybody who watched, listened, and otherwise to the Black Powder Podcast, the only real libertarian podcast that exists in this galaxy, universe, and on Earth. We're extraterrestrial in liberty. This is not a one-time thing. This is an ongoing effort to spread the message that you need to live free or die.
Or die.
It's the Black Powder Podcast. Thank you, Chase. Thank you, Eric.